Sometimes we have to talk about other amendments to the Constitution, including the First Amendment and the Establishment Clause, i.e., Americans cannot establish a national religion. We have to talk about it because guess what? In the state of Louisiana, and now apparently Texas, laws are being proposed and adopted that say that schools have to display on their walls copies of the Ten Commandments. Is this constitutional? Let's talk about the Establishment Clause and get a little geeky about something other than the Second Amendment, because remember, all our rights all work together to preserve all of our freedoms. Stay tuned. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and author of the brand new best-selling book, Israel Disarmed, What the 10/7 Attack Teaches Americans About the Right to Bear Arms. Make sure you check out a copy on Amazon. A lot of Second Amendment information in there about the importance of privately armed citizens. We must learn from the mistakes the Israeli made so we don't make them here. All right, folks, so a quick segment here on the First Amendment. As you know, the First Amendment has multiple provisions: the right to free speech, the right to a free press, free assembly, right to a religion. One of the things that we don't talk a lot about, but we're going to talk about here for just a few minutes, is what's known as the Establishment Clause. The First Amendment's Establishment Clause that says that the national government cannot establish a national religion. Keep in mind, contextually, that the religion of, for example, the United Kingdom is the Church of England. It's Anglicanism, or here would be called Episcopalianism. In France, the national religion officially is Catholicism. Okay? But when the Founding Fathers wrote the Bill of Rights, they wanted people to have full-blown religious freedom and not be forced to conform to one particular religion imposed upon them by the national federal government. And thus they put in the First Amendment the Establishment Clause, which provides in relevant part that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Establishment of religion. Now, what does that mean? Well, for most of our American history, it was viewed as simply that. You cannot create the national religion of the United States is Methodism or Catholicism or Islam or whatever. It doesn't matter. The idea is you could not have a national religion passed at the federal level. What happened, though, is in sort of the mid-20th century, as you had the rise of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and progressivism that sought to elevate humanism over anything that was virtuous or moral or God-related. The notion being that positive law, which is essentially a word for man-made law, is supreme to God and God law and morality and the like. And the progressives in the 20th century were all about removing God in all respects from society and replacing it with a new God, like communism did, that God known as government. They wanted people to respect and honor government officials and laws enacted by these government officials by people smarter than we, the people, and they wanted to remove from the public space all aspects of morality, virtue, judgment between good behavior, bad behavior, and of course, religion that speaks to a lot of those issues. So for many decades, the U.S. Supreme Court went along with this kind of view, this elitist view, that religion, morality, virtue had no say in the public space. And in the court system, the way it worked is liberal groups, progressive groups would bring these lawsuits claiming that these aspects of religion that appeared in the public sphere, whether it be in a public park, whether it be in a public building, whether it be in a school, these needed to be removed because it violated the First Amendment's Establishment Clause that said Congress shall not establish a national religion. Now, this was obviously a bunch of constitutional hooey because the notion of separation of church and state doesn't appear except in one place in American history before the 20th century. That is in a letter, a private letter written by Thomas Jefferson. Long after I think he was out of public life, he wrote a letter to a friend where he made a reference to the wall of separation between church and state. That one reference by Thomas Jefferson in a private letter became the law of the land and the metaphor and the argument and the reference that every anti-religion, in my view, group that wanted to remove morality, virtue, and religion from the public space in all of its components. And there were these lawsuits brought, and the Supreme Court basically created an Establishment Clause jurisdiction that said all sorts of things that you could remove from the public space. Now, there was total hypocrisy on this part, because one of the things these liberal judges on the Supreme Court signed off on in a case of Marsh versus Chambers, I believe, was that it was perfectly fine for the Congress to open every session up with a prayer. The idea being that at the time of our founding, Congress, the first Congress, the second Congress, and so on, all allowed and encouraged and had a religious comment, a prayer over the proceeding to say that, the legislators would do good work and be virtuous and, bless them and on their way and protect America and so on and so on. And the Supreme Court said, in light of that history at the time of the founding, did you hear what I just said? Founding era history, that was perfectly fine. But when it came to like schools and all these other public spaces like monuments and public parks, they wanted by and large those things to be removed. That was the law of the land for a period of several decades. But then things started to shift back as people started to focus on the notion of originalism, where you really did go back to the founding and try to figure out what did the founders mean. And it was pretty clear that what the founding fathers understood was that morality and virtuousness was extremely important, because remember, you and I were citizens, and the founders thought to have a true Republican form of government where you and I and we the people ultimately have the say in how our society operates, the laws that are enacted, the way we behave. You really do want people that are good, moral, virtuous people, that you can trust them in your home, and they're not going to steal the silverware because they just understand that to be wrong, even if there's not, let's say, a criminal penalty associated with it. So you really want people acting out of good behavior and morals, and the Founding Fathers understood this. For example, Founding Father John Adams specifically said at one point, quote, Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people, And again, what he's really just saying is we expect Americans to behave well, to understand the difference between right and wrong. Why is murder wrong? You got to understand these basic precepts. Why is rape wrong? In some ways, we've talked about this in the context of the Second Amendment, where I've explained to you the difference between malum in se crimes, which are crimes that are evil in and of themselves, versus malum prohibitum crimes. So again, rape, robbery, murder, theft, fraud. These are just understand to be inherently evil in any kind of society, and a legitimate society in my view. And of course, alternatively, you have malum prohibitum crimes, which are really things like the length of a barrel of a gun and what's legal under the NFA. These are just malum prohibitum crimes. They're only illegal because they say so. There's no moral or evil or ethical component to any of that, and that's the key. That the Founding Fathers thought it was important to have a moral society with good values and not these arbitrary nonsense kind of laws. So anyway, turning back to what's going on in Texas and in Louisiana, they want to and are requiring the posting of the 10 Commandments. Now, some of the components of the 10 Commandments say things like you shall not commit murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, all sorts of things. And in many respects, if you look at this, what it really is about is good behavior, good moral behavior. There's not really a religious component per se. Both the Jews and the Christians and all their different sects and components, all subscribe to these basic notions. And again, really good moral people generally speaking, think that these 10 Commandments are sort of a good rule of life for how we live our lives. So again, I don't think there's any First Amendment problem here, because this has nothing to do with establishing a religion. It's simply sort of displaying and educating students about a foundational document that gave rise to our country. And let's not forget that our national motto here in the United States, what is our national motto? You know what I'm about to say. It's in God we trust. In God we trust. So the Founding Fathers really understood the importance of appealing to a higher authority, because that higher authority in many respects is what distinguishes us from the animals, where we have judgment and we have morals and virtuousness, and we elevate some of our decision making. That's what we're supposed to be striving for, above what's just good for us in the moment. All right, so in sum, as you watch this debate out in Texas and Louisiana, other states adopting the 10 Commandments, I don't think at the end of the day there's going to be a constitutional problem, because again, the Establishment Clause in the modern era is an originalist clause. They go back to the founding, and the founding fathers really just did not want a national religion. It had nothing to do with saying that you can't talk about religion at a public a football game. You can't discuss religion. You can't discuss God. You can't discuss any of these things. And the fact is that Congress continues to open up their legislative sessions with prayers from chaplains and the like. And in God we trust is actually the national model and things along those lines, and the religious symbols on our currency and things along these lines. It's pretty clear that religion or things that have religious underpinnings, of course, can be part of the public space. And of course, if you want to make the case, which I sometimes have seen out there that say, well, we can't respect anything in the Bible because if it's the Bible, it violates the First Amendment. Well, that would mean laws against murder, adultery, laws against theft, fraud, and the like, which arise from the Ten Commandments, would have to be undone. And that's simply plain stupid. In addition to the fact it's not unconstitutional. So anyway, there you have it, folks. Hope you learned something here today about the First Amendment Establishment Clause. Just a little bit of information to make you the smartest person in the room. Don't forget to subscribe here. And I appreciate the fact that we're now at 150,000 subscribers. I'm going to keep working hard to improve and produce a better product. And don't forget to follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner. And we will see you again soon here. Yes, indeed, at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.